Sometimes we fall in love with a place with as much comfort and passion as we fall in love with a person. Well, Paris was such a place for me. Living in Paris was like walking into my own dreams. And this love affair with the city taught me so many lessons, a few of which I'm going to share with you today. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy you're here. I'm your host, Sharri Harmel, and on this channel, we have discussions and I take you places that hopefully inspire you to create your own fabulous next chapters. Mine began in Paris, and I bring all I learned on that crazy journey to you today. Whether your next chapter is happening due to a major milestone, such as retirement, a divorce, the passing of someone you love, or it's just the next phase of your life, you can find yourself working through new challenges, new experiences, and suddenly be faced with new perspectives. And that's what we talk about and share with each other on this channel so that you too can design your own fabulous next chapter. Well, I fell in love with Paris on my first holiday post my divorce. Now, I guess you'd say the divorce was officially the start of my next chapter, but I actually think it started when I fell in love with Paris. That was when I felt myself changing. I always say that Paris healed me. Paris taught me to feel like a woman again. After decades of being valued only for how I supported others, I didn't lose myself entirely, don't get me wrong, but I did lose any sense of myself as a woman. I let myself become focused on doing, and many of you probably can relate. And because no one in my life was interested in any aspect of me as a woman, I let myself forget it too. Well, all that changed on my first trip to Paris. And as I spent more and more time in Paris, so did too, I have to say, did many of my routines and perspectives on life actually change. So let's get started, because I think some of these lessons I learned, if we want to call it that, are going to help you maybe hopefully have positive value in your life, in the creation of your next chapter. So let's dive in. Starting with style. Style is, we have the perception that style is everything in Paris, right? And this one is, I'm going to start with the ladies because obviously I'm a woman, and was a huge lesson for me. And that is, get yourself some beautiful lingerie, even if it's just matching cotton undies and a gorgeous bra. Make sure that they match, okay? In France, all of France, but certainly in Paris, no French woman out there would buy underwear that's nude color and a bra that's black. You'd never wear them together. Everything has to match underneath, if that makes any sense. Well, on my first trip to Paris, I met Poupie Cadole, and Poupie Cadole is the head of Cadole Lingerie, which is one of France's oldest and most exquisite couture lingerie companies. They actually still, on the couture side, they actually still make undergarments for most of the red carpets, many of the couture fashion shows. They are geniuses at figuring out how to make undergarments that hold in everything and yet are not visible. Well, I had the pleasure actually of not only becoming a good friend of Poupie's. She has meant so much to me in my time in France, but she also taught me that what's underneath your clothing, what is directly touching your skin, is much more important than what you buy to wear on the outside. It sounds crazy, but wearing a beautiful bra actually changes how you feel during the day as you go about your daily life, whether you're still going to work or you're cleaning the house, you're making dinner, whatever it might be. it sounds, like I said, it sounds really crazy, but it helps you to feel for some reason. And I did this myself when, after my first visit to Paris, I actually ordered a bra, a beautiful bra that Poopy made for me. And when I returned to the United States, returned to work, in those days I worked in higher education, I felt different. One day I'd wear my old American made bra, and then the next day I'd wear my French bra that Poopy's company had made for me. I felt entirely different. So beautiful lingerie actually helps you to feel more feminine, more womanly, more cherished, because you're cherishing yourself. And so consequently, you feel more cherished. And ladies, that is true. And it is important whether you have a partner or not, whether anyone will see what's underneath or not. How you feel, and what touches your skin is most important to you, whether anyone ever sees it or not. And gentlemen, if you're thinking, as you're listening, oh my gosh, Sharri, why don't you move on? This isn't about me. It is. So if you have a lady in your life, buy her, go with her, which is very common in France. You go with her to help her to pick out these gorgeous bra and panty sets, if you want to call it that. And it's not all about preparing for what's to come after she takes it off. It's about helping her to cherish and love her own femininity. And dare I say, gentlemen, you might want to pay a little more attention to your own undies. It matters for everyone. So continuing the style conversation, this is a big one, in Paris especially, and obviously throughout France, avoid splashing labels. It is just not something that is common. It's actually considered somewhat gauche, if I'm completely honest. Emily in Paris is a satire to some extent, especially the way Emily dresses. And so consequently, don't pay attention to that. That's not real. In France, and especially in Paris, or what I see in Paris, because that's the city I know best in France, displaying designer labels on your clothing, on your accessories, that it's loud and clear isn't done. And that tells you that most of the luxury goods companies that make products where it's branded, like across the t-shirt, or, there's a bag and it says Christian Dior on the side or whatever, most of those products are made for export. Because it's people are outside of the country, outside of that culture, that really like significantly branded products. Recently I was with a friend. We actually went to Christian Dior. She had something that she needed to return. And I was immediately drawn to the handbags and the scarves and even the jewelry that had the subtle Dior star. If you read anything about the history of Christian Dior, the star was so very important. Miss Dior is a biography, actually, of Christian Dior and the company. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and you'll learn about his sister, Catherine Dior. But, it's like I was drawn to those handbags and those scarves that you didn't see the brand all over it, which is fascinating, because if you ever have the opportunity to go to the Christian Dior Museum in Paris, you will see all of his the old couture outfits that he created, and none of them had his name splashed across them. That is a very recent evolution, should I say, of couture. Rather interesting. Now, I can't afford anything in Dior, to be perfectly honest, but just being in that shop, I realized that my tastes have really changed over the years, or maybe I recognize my tastes a little bit more, which is to let the world see you first not your handbag, not your t-shirt, and not make judgments about you based on the handbag that you're carrying or the brand that you're exposing, whatever it might be. Very interesting, an interesting perspective on luxury, if we want to call it that. Continuing on that conversation, something else that I have observed in my time there in France, is that there is an appreciation for the subtle, an appreciation for the not in your face, it relates to the brand, but subtlety, whether it's the clothing style, jewelry, even makeup, it's all simpler and much more subtle. I don't know the history of this cultural characteristic, and if any of you have some ideas as to where that came from, but it shows up. There's a clean lineness, which is fascinating because when you look at the exterior of French buildings, especially the Haussmann designed buildings, you'll see this ornate ironwork on the balconies. You might even see very ornate plaster work at the tops of buildings, which is fascinating because their clothing is as a whole pretty simple. The lines are simple, where the details might be in the belt, might be in the lace on the collar. It might be that something lacy is peeking out from the V of the dress or the blouse or whatever it is. But overall, the lines are incredibly clean. The other difference I notice is their use of color and clothing. And part of it is, Parisian apartments as a whole, any old French home, there's no closets. And so consequently, people have their clothing in wardrobes. And, you don't have the space. My apartment in Paris is about 63 square meters, which is not even 1,000 square feet. And there is no room, no space for walk-in closets, no space for a room lined with wardrobes. And so consequently, you can't have as many clothes. And when you think about it, if you wear bright colored clothing, it's much more noticeable and much more restrictive in terms of how you can wear that clothing. And so consequently, maybe that's the reason why. I don't know the background story pretty much to all of that. But what I do notice is that loud colors are not a part of their clothing culture. It's a much more, like I said, subtle approach. Where you do see colors sometimes are in lipsticks, and you do not see it in eyeshadows, but you see it sometimes in lipsticks, and you will see it in accessories. You might see it in, a red bag, a pink bag, something of that sort. Scarves, you'll see the color in the scarves, but you will not tend to see it in the actual clothing, which is kind of an interesting way to play with our own wardrobes. Every woman I know talks about downsizing their closet. They may not necessarily even be moving, but they need to get rid of stuff. Everyone's talking about, like, I don't want to leave my children with all of this stuff. And I'm tired of my stuff, and I got to empty my closet of stuff. And so it's an interesting concept that we move to more subtle colors and we use accessories to bring in the seasonal color or the trendy color or whatever it might be. It's fascinating. Just recently I was in another shop, and in walked two women. I'm in Boston currently, and in walked two women that I knew right away were European, just based on the way they were dressed. They were at least my age, if not older. They had very simple hairstyles, but they had beautiful, clean lined clothing. One of them had a shawl on because it was a little bit chilly. Another had a sweater thrown over her shoulders. Both of them had very subtle jewelry on. One even had tennis shoes on. But there was an elegance and a cleanness to what they were wearing that I don't see very often. And I live in what I think is a rather cosmopolitan city. I don't see it very often, at least in America. The rest of you who live elsewhere, please weigh in because I'd love to hear what you think. But part of it's like America doesn't have any role models anymore of how to dress. It's fascinating to me. I look at my grandkids and they all, who do they want to dress like? The girls, they want to dress like Taylor Swift, but it's not Taylor Swift at home. Nobody knows how Taylor dresses when she's not on the stage. I have granddaughters who think they want to dress like Taylor Swift. I can't even say her name, like Taylor does when she's performing. And so it's all about this performance dress, and there's no style teaching, there's none of that in schools anymore. And so consequently, young people, I think, really have a gap in learning style and how to put things together. That's something that does not happen as I see in Paris. I see little girls who dress beautifully, and part of it is they have phenomenal role models because they're seeing their mothers, they're seeing their mothers' friends, they're seeing grandmothers, and so they see multi-generations of beautiful style. And yeah, and there's not that appreciation for that performance style. They very much recognize that Emily in Paris, as an example, is hysterical because it's almost I can't even think of the word, but it's really a joke on what is a stereotypical American in Paris dressing like. And those of you who are men, pay attention. Pay attention to other men. Pay attention to how men dress in other parts of the world. And because I think you'll learn from it. I can spot an American man on the street in Paris, probably a block away in comparison to a French man. I know exactly the difference. I may not know different European men as an example, but I can tell an American. I can even tell in the airport when we're waiting to board the plane in America, which people on that plane are French and which people on that plane are American, because the style of dress is so, so different. And that is something I learned because as we get older, one of the things that I've noticed is, dressing like Taylor Swift makes sense when you're 10 years old or you're 12 years old. Dressing like a slob, I just sent a granddaughter off to Edinburgh, University of Edinburgh. And, I saw what she was wearing on the airplane. Grandma didn't say a word, but dressing like that works for her. She's teeny tiny and she's young with young skin and beautiful hair. It doesn't work as you age. And so we all need to make a little bit more of a concerted effort as we grow older. And I think that's a lesson that I actually learned in Paris because so much is about looking natural, whether it's makeup or it's hair or even that you just threw on your outfit, and yet a whole lot of work is behind trying to look natural. So I think that's interesting. And yeah, so I do mention makeup because I think makeup is so important, especially as we start to age. Because in Paris, you will not see obvious false eyelashes. You will not see obvious bronzer or really bright nail polish or bright eyeshadow, any of that, sparkles on the face, none of that. It's just not part of their culture. And I have really embraced that. Not that I ever did that, but I really like it. And yet it does require work. It requires some attention to simplicity and also attention to how we're changing. I don't know about you, but some of you ladies who are maybe my age or older, you know that everything on your face practically is fading. fading away. Your hair is not as bright as it was, might even be growing gray. Your eyebrows have faded, possibly some of you. It doesn't matter what your skin color, your birth skin color was, it all becomes dull. I mean that. So the foundation that you wore maybe even 5 years ago, if you go outside and you look at yourself, it probably doesn't work anymore. And so you have to constantly, be checking in. Where am I now? What am I looking like now? What is my skin looking like now? So anyways, that was something that I think Paris, that was one of my biggest lessons about how to dress and a preference for subtlety in truly in style and clothing. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about meals and eating. The French, on a regular basis, eat a substantial meal in the middle of the day. Their lunches are significant. And only recently was it not illegal to eat your lunch at your desk, believe it or not. And so lunches are important. There are important times for people to go eat a decent meal, to sit with colleagues or themselves alone. Many French people, French workers like to get a meal, a full meal. We're not talking, some little meal, a sandwich. It's typically a full meal, and they will often end up at the park, having their lunch if it's a beautiful day out. Or you will look at cafes. And I'm telling you, if you visit Paris and you don't have a reservation for lunch, and at 12:30 you think you're going to get in a seat in a good cafe, you will be standing in line, truly, because that is the time that workers start their lunches. And every good cafe is absolutely jam-packed. And lunch involves usually, an appetizer of some sort, a main course of some sort, and a dessert. They're significant. And they truly eat the way many people would like to eat, which is, that main course has a vegetable, it has a protein, it has some sort of a starch. And and truly, not that French people don't, also have large dinners. It's just when they go out for dinner or they go to a friend's house for dinner, dinner is always later in the day, as you well know, by what you've probably read. Dinner in France typically doesn't start until 7:30 at night, which is very different than most places in America. As an example, I don't know about other countries. So again, weigh in. I'd love to hear, what is the routine? What is typical in your country and your culture? But when people have big dinners planned or a special dinner plan, they eat very light at lunch. And it's all about balance. So what happens then when people aren't eating out in the evening and having a celebratory dinner of some kind, and their lunch is large, dinner is very light. And dinner tends to be, soup and salad, a half a sandwich and salad, lots and lots of soups, believe it or not, cold soups, hot soups, depending upon the time of year. I actually have gotten into this habit completely because I travel a lot and I travel alone most of the time. And eating out alone at lunchtime is completely comfortable, totally normal. If you look around the restaurant, doesn't matter what country you're in, you will see people eating alone. It's not considered unusual. Dinner is a little bit more different and more difficult to eat out at a dinner and feel comfortable if you're eating alone. Plus, if you're like me, you don't like walking around at night by yourself. It's not fun. And so consequently, that's why it's so fun to have the big meal at lunchtime. So think about that. Another big change, big shift I've seen, and I'm actually trying to help my daughter to incorporate it with her children, and that is to eat seasonally. And again, I would love to hear from those of you who are outside the United States, because in the United States, because we ship our food all over the place, we don't eat seasonally. You can get blueberries in the middle of winter in Minnesota. Crazy. They don't taste very good, but you can get them. So what I have learned by being in Paris is really the timing of seasons and what food is in season at that particular time of year, and to appreciate that food. So it's much more fun to sit there and say, oh my gosh, it's we call in America, we call them zucchini squash. In France, they're called courgettes. And that season goes on for a good bit of time. And if you go to any farmer's market, you know, it doesn't matter where, you will see what's in season, and you will see a massive quantity of it. So the zucchini squash or the courgette season goes on for a long time. And how fun it is to come up with recipes to use those, whatever that vegetable is that seems to be long lasting, asparagus, the same thing. Rather than running around in January trying to find a melon because you got yourself all excited about a particular recipe. More and more cookbooks, I think, and you can do it for yourself, and why not, is to arrange your favorite recipes by season rather than by ingredients or by courses, because it doesn't matter. You can make a fabulous, you know, courgette soup, whether it's cold for this, you know, at certain times of the year, or hot. But that season is like now, because they're multiplying in your garden as we speak, especially obviously in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's something that I have grown to appreciate, love, and am trying to help my daughter to embrace. My daughter has many children. And so she keeps saying, how do I bring some of those more healthy ways of eating into my family's life? And I think the first place to start is eat seasonally, because whatever you're eating off season doesn't carry the nutritional benefits that it carries when it's in season. So consequently, you know, the blueberries that you're eating in February that have been shipped from Chile, as an example, do not carry, because they had to travel and they had to get picked at a certain time so that they could arrive in your grocery store. Let's say you're in North America at a certain time. They do not carry the nutritional benefits that they do when they're in season. And so consequently, I think many of us, I'm totally off my topic here, but many of us are deprived of certain vitamins because we're eating out of season. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. Then the next whole area that I wanted to talk about is manners. And this can be a rather sensitive topic. First of all, one of the things that I notice and I'm acutely aware of, and I almost grimace sometimes, is the loudness of people's voices in public, especially in public places. This is, I hear it in England, and I also hear it here. England, I hear it in London. I'm not really outside of London, so those of you who are outside London, tell me what you think. But I certainly hear it in United States. I was taping a Come With Me video recently to Italy, which is in Boston. And honest to God, twice during the taping of that video, I had somebody directly next to me who was yelling at somebody across the restaurant or across the shop. And so I had to turn the recorder off because they were absolutely screaming in my ear. Or how many times do you sit in a bus or a metro or, you know, subway, whatever you happen to call yours, or you're in a coffee shop and the person next to you is talking extremely loud and you have to listen to their entire conversation. Now, I'm going to get very controversial and talk about speakers, the speaker aspect of our iPhones. Most of us have iPhones. something is wrong with people who are my age. They turn speaker on when they are in a public place and have some idea that's okay. It is the most irritating thing in the world. And I do not understand why whoever sells people iPhones doesn't say, you know what, you need to get earbuds. And this is how they work. I was in a restaurant once. I was eating alone. The woman who was behind me in the booth was eating alone, but she was on her phone and she had the speaker, option pressed. So I was listening to all of that. And it was so obnoxious. And I tapped her on the shoulder when I was leaving and I said, in the future, you might want to think about getting earbuds so that I don't have to, or other people don't have to listen to your conversation. She didn't know what I was talking about. She said, really? They work? So I don't know how educated the population, let's say 55, 60 years old and on up, but that is typically who is on their phone and has the speaker option pressed. So that may not apply to 90% of you, but you can be more conscious of how loudly you're talking, how loudly you're speaking, how you get the attention of a fellow family member or a colleague if you're in a space where there is a lot of people. That's something that I think is fascinating. And it's something that shocks me every time I return to the United States. Another is walking into a shop, walking into a restaurant, walking into a business and saying hello, and then saying goodbye when you leave. That is the quickest way, not doing that is the quickest way to be treated rudely in a shop in France. And rest of you weigh in on this. I would love to hear your thoughts and what the practice is in your countries or in your cities. Acknowledging others is important. It really is. It doesn't matter what their job is. It doesn't matter if it's the clerk in the grocery store or, a shopkeeper, or, it's a high-end shop, or, the fellow who's picking up the garbage. Why not say hello? And when you walk out of those particular places of business, why not say goodbye? Bonjour, au revoir. Yeah, those are standard. That is part of French culture. And I think it should be part of the culture everywhere, because why not acknowledge someone else exists, right? That's visibility. And that's what we're all going for. The next is a shift in perspective, really. It's about making time for self-care. And this is something I've learned through many of my conversations with French women. Self-care is not selfish. It's not self-indulgent. And self-care involves not just your face, it's also your mindset, it's also your body. And there's a whole different perspective about how important that is, I have learned, in France versus in the United States. United States, so much of self-care is about anti-aging, quite honestly. And in France, that is not the case. Self-care starts at a very young age, and it's about self-care. It's about taking care of what is all about you on this earth. So starting with your face, what I used to do is I would try to, when I was raising kids and, running around, and a few of you on this call, might be in that particular situation. But what I did was wait till the end of the day to do everything about my face, to do my journaling, everything. And I was so tired that all I could do was brush my teeth, wash my face, throw on a little moisturizer, and fall into bed. Now, this is the one aspect of our next chapter, is that we have the time to kind of measure out our self-care. You don't have to do it all at night when you're tired. You can do it. That's one thing about eating light in the evening, having a light dinner early, is that you can do some of your self-care at, 7 o'clock at night versus at right before you're ready to go to bed. I have relished learning to take care of my face, actually look in my eyes, do my face fitness exercises, rubbing on serums, whatever it is. I also try to get, when I can afford it, I'll schedule facials. But when I can't, I will often try, some of the fun masks, or whether or not there are some, home remedies or home treatments that I could try. That's one thing that if you go to a pharmacy in Paris, any pharmacy in Paris, you will see envelopes of masks, different kinds of masks. I mean, one, relaxation and stress release, pore cleansing. They're very into detoxing. So there's detoxing of everything. Others moisturize and energize and all of that. So, it's really a change of routine and perspective of sitting in the evening with one of those masks on and reading a good book or watching a great show on television. So you can multitask, but you have to think about self-care. And this leads to mindset, which is another part of self-care. We think of mindset as something totally different and self-care as what you put on your face or your body, but actually you're taking care of your mindset affects your face. All you have to do is be stressed out or have something god awful happen in your life and you will see it on your face, right? So what goes on in here affects what goes on in here, much more than the serums that you put on your face or the moisturizer you use. And, one of the things that I think is so important is reading about the past, never putting those classics away, never putting away the history books, because I think all of that gives us a perspective on how we as humans have gotten so many things wrong in our past and try to not repeat it. And honestly, and I'm being very, very frank with you, I think that's one of the areas where we have kind of missed it in the schools. We don't talk about history as much as we should because we learn from history. Rather than erasing it, we learn from it. Also, I find that one of the questions I have to ask myself, especially as I've gotten older, is what if I'm wrong? What if what I think is going on is not what's going on? What if the actual opposite is true? What if I think is so true is actually not true? And Byron Katie is the one who has always asked us to ask the question, what do I truly know is true? I love that. What do I really know is true? Because so many of our opinions, our judgments, and even our decisions are based on information that we think is true, but we don't really know if it's true or not, especially in the world that we live in now, which so much due to AI, but due to human nature, due to social media, we don't really know what is true that we're reading online. And so many people, especially as we age, get really sure that what I read is true, and yet we don't. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, what's going on? We have to start with ourselves. Am I really that? Do I really know that? What if that isn't true? What does that mean? So we have to constantly ask ourselves those hard questions. Last on that list of self-care is exercise. Now you can take one look at me and know that I am not an exercise fanatic. But recently, what I noticed is that my walking significantly increases when I'm in Boston and Paris versus when I'm in Minnesota visiting my kids. Now, it's not that, I'm running off to the gym every day in Boston or Paris. But my daily life in both of those cities is much more active than when I'm in Minnesota. Paris and Boston, I have to walk to everything. It's just natural. Everyone does. You're walking also up and down steps. If you use the metro or you use the T in Boston, you have to go up and down steps all the time. Yes, there are elevators, but honestly, you don't want to get in the elevators. Up and down the steps you go. And you put in a significant number of steps just going about daily life. Minnesota, as an example, is a driving culture. Part of it is the weather, but part of it is it's a very suburban, spread out city. And so consequently, they never appeared to have mass transit, very well established mass transit, and it requires a car. And so I was noticing on my iPhone, you can track or see how many steps you've taken, how few steps I was taking in Minnesota when I was visiting people. And obviously a visit is very different from actually living. But one thing that I chose to do is my daughter, her home has a driveway that's on a hill. And I used to drive up, get as close to the front door as I could possibly get. Now I park at the bottom of the hill and I walk up the hill. When I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to pick up some things for my daughter, or even pick up children from their schools, respective schools. I park as far away as possible so that I get more steps in order to get to wherever it is that I want to go. So, if you're struggling to get yourself to the gym and you keep thinking, oh, I have to join a gym. This is what I have to do in order to get in better shape. Stop beating yourself up and just figure out how can you add more movement into your everyday life. That's the French way. They walk everywhere. They pull those grocery trolleys. You've all seen them. In America, they're typically only used by much, much older people. In France, in Paris, as an example, whether you're 25 or you're 95, you're pulling one of those shopping trolleys because it's just so much easier. It's so much easier to go grocery shopping, to do whatever it is that you need to do when you even go to the market, go to the flea market, whatever it might be. It's so much easier if you have a trolley because you can carry everything with you and you don't need to get in a car, which is fascinating. So take stairs wherever you can. See if you can take the stairs. I recently had a physical and it was interesting because my doctor said something to me. Maybe doctors have said this to me before and it just didn't sink in. But he said, I was talking about possibly because I struggle with my weight all the time, setting up appointments with a nutritionist. And even though I feel like I could write a book on nutrition, I felt like maybe that accountability would help me. And my doctor actually said, no, Sharri, I would rather see you set up an appointment with an exercise trainer than a nutritionist. And I said, why? And he said, aging well is all about shortening your ability to rebound or lessening the time it takes you to rebound. And that comment just shocked me and it made me think. And he and I, got further into the conversation and he said that as people age, the ability to rebound from a sickness, an operation, an injury, all gets longer and longer and longer until you actually can't rebound or don't rebound. And therefore, really, if you want to take care of yourself, which is self-care, you want to keep yourself as strong and vital as possible so that you can bounce back when you get sick, because we all get sick, or you injure yourself, which can happen at any age. And that was an entirely new perspective. So let's strengthen our bodies and our minds so that we can rebound as quickly as possible from whatever it is that life throws at us. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Keep sharing your feedback. I respond to as many of you as humanly possible, but it's just me. I don't have I don't have anyone else who responds on any of those comments other than me. So sometimes I get behind and I apologize for that, but do keep on commenting. You'll learn from each other as much, if not more, than you will learn from me. So keep sharing. I think it's beneficial for all of us to have your feedback. And remember, my book, Design Your Fabulous Next Chapter, is coming out at the end of this year. And I encourage all of you to join my VIP book waitlist if you haven't already. It costs nothing to join the waitlist. You just go to sharriharmel.com and you join. And you'll get updates along the way. You get a few tools along the way. And we may even have a special event during the time of the book launch. So go to sharriharmel.com and join the VIP waitlist. Take care, everyone, and stay focused on all that you are creating in your fabulous next chapter. A biento.